Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you are preparing for a software developer associate interview, then you are in the right place. In this video, I will walk you through some of the most commonly asked interview questions, explain them in a simple way, and give you answer that will impress your interviewer. So, whether you are a beginner or someone brushing up on concepts, stay with me till the end. And if you find this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tech related content. Alright, let's get started. So, what is the difference between a compiled language and an interpreted language? So, let's begin with a fundamental concept that often confuses beginners: compiled versus interpreted language. A compiled language like C or C++ is translated into machine code before execution. This means the entire program is converted into a format that the computer understands in one go, making it faster when running. On the other hand, an interpreted language like Python or JavaScript is executed line by line by an interpreter. This makes it easier to debug but sometimes slower compared to compiled languages. Think of it this way: compiled languages are like baking a cake. You prepare everything first, bake it, and then eat it. And interpreted languages are like cooking a dish step by step, tasting as you go. Each has its own advantages depending on the use case. Now that we have covered this, let's move on to something that every developer must know: version control system. So, what is the purpose of version control system? Imagine you are working on a coding project and suddenly you realize you have made a mistake. Wouldn't it be great if you could go back in time and restore a previous version? This is exactly what version control system like Git help with. A VCS allows multiple developers to work on the same project without overwriting each other's changes. It keeps a history of changes, so if something goes wrong, you can revert to an earlier version. Think of it like Google Docs history feature. You can always go back and see who changed what and when. Speaking of organizing things properly, let's talk about data structure, a key concept in programming. So, what is data structure? Can you name some common data structures? A data structure is a way to organize and store data so that it can be accessed and modified efficiently. Different types of data structures help solve different kinds of problems. Some of the most common data structures include arrays, a simple collection of elements; linked list, a sequence of nodes where each node points to the next one; a sequence of nodes where each node points to the next one; stacks, a LIFO, last in first out; structure, like a stack of plates; queues, a FIFO, first in first out; structure like a line at a ticket counter; trees, a hierarchical structure like a family trees; and last, graphs, a network of connected nodes like a city's road system. Choosing the right data structure can improve performance and efficiency. Now that we have covered data structures, let's talk about how object oriented programming helps organize code better. So, what is the difference between an abstract class and an interface in OOPS? Object oriented programming (OOP) helps developers write reusable and structured code. Two important concepts in OOP are abstract classes and interfaces. An abstract class can have both defined, already implemented, and undefined, to be implemented by subclass methods. An interface, on the other hand, only defines method signatures. It does not provide implementation. Think of an abstract class as a partially built car. It has some features, but manufacturers can modify or extend it. An interface is like a set of rules that all vehicles must follow, such as having wheels and an engine. Understanding these concepts is crucial for designing scalable applications. Speaking of design, let's now discuss design patterns. So, what is a design pattern? Can you name a few design patterns? A design pattern is a general, reusable solution to a common problem in software design. It's like a blueprint that helps developers write cleaner and more efficient code. Some popular design patterns include: singleton pattern ensures only one instance of a class exists; factory pattern creates objects without specifying their exact class; observer pattern allows multiple objects to listen for updates, and strategy pattern enables switching between different algorithms dynamically. Understanding design patterns help in writing modular and maintainable code, but how do you measure the efficiency of the code we write? That's where big O notation comes in. So, what is a big O notation? Big O notation helps us analyze how efficient an algorithm is in terms of time and space. It tells us how an algorithm's runtime increases as the input size grows. Some common complexities are O1 constant time, fastest, independent of input size. O log n logarithmic time used in binary search. O of n linear time scales directly with input size. O of n square quadratic time slow for large input. By analyzing big O notation, we can choose the most optimal solution for a problem. Now let's explore another key OOP concept, polymorphism. So what is polymorphism in OOP? Polymorphism allows a single method name to have different behaviors based on the object it is called on. For example, a draw method. If called on a circle, it draws a circle. If called on a square, it draws a square. Polymorphism makes code more flexible and reusable. Now let's talk about recursion, a powerful concept used in problem solving. So what is recursion in programming? Recursion is when a function calls itself to solve a problem. It is useful for problems that can be broken down into smaller subproblems like calculating factorials, solving the Fibonacci sequence, tree traversals. A simple way to understand recursion is thinking of Russian nesting dolls. Each doll contains a smaller one inside, following the same pattern. Now let's shift gears and talk about multi-threading issue like deadlocks. So, what is a deadlock in multi-threading? A deadlock happens when two or more threads are waiting on each other to release resources and none can proceed. Imagine two people trying to pass through a narrow door at the same time. If neither step backs, they both get stuck. To avoid deadlocks, we use techniques like lock ordering timeouts. Deadlocks can slow down applications, so developers must handle concurrency carefully. Speaking of writing efficient code, let's wrap up with solid principles. So, what are the solid principles? Solid is a set of 5 principles for writing maintainable object oriented code. S stands for single responsibility principle. O stands for open close principle. L stands for Liskov substitution principle. And I stand for interface segregation principle. And D stands for dependency inversion principle. Following solid makes code scalable, readable, and maintainable. So now let's move to the next question. What's the difference between SQL and NoSQL databases? Let's start with databases, a fundamental part of software development. SQL and NoSQL databases serve different purposes. SQL databases are relational, meaning they store data in tables with a fixed schema. They are based for structured data and support complex queries using SQL. Examples include MySQL, PostgreSQL, and Oracle. NoSQL databases, on the other hand, are non-relational and often schema-less. They are designed for scalability and handling large flexible data. Examples include MongoDB, Cassandra, and Redis. Think of SQL databases as organized file cabinets, while NoSQL databases are more like flexible whiteboards that can adapt to different types of data. Speaking of database structure, let's now talk about primary keys and their importance. A primary key is a unique identifier for each record in a table. It ensures that every row is distinct and can be accessed efficiently. For example, in a student database, the student ID can be a primary key because each student has a unique ID. Primary key helps in maintaining data integrity and speeding up searches. But what if we need to link two tables together? That's where foreign keys comes in. So what is a foreign key in a database? A foreign key is a column in one table that references the primary key of another table. It helps maintain referential integrity by ensuring that relationships between tables remain consistent. For instance, in an orders table, the customer ID can be a foreign key that links the customer table, ensuring that an order always belongs to a valid customer. Foreign keys enforce relationship and prevent orphaned records. Now let's switch gears and discuss constructor in object-oriented programming. So, what is the purpose of a constructor in object-oriented programming? A constructor is a special method in object-oriented programming that initializes an object when it is created. For example, when you create a new car object, the constructor can automatically assign a brand, model, and color without needing to set them manually every time. Constructor make object creation more efficient and help maintain consistency in object properties. But when dealing with objects, how do you manage dependencies efficiently? That's where dependency injection comes into play. So, what is dependency injection? Dependency injection (DI) is a design pattern where a class gets its dependencies from an external source instead of creating them internally. Why is this useful? It makes the code modular, easier to test and maintainable. Think of it like this. Instead of a chef growing their own vegetables, they receive fresh produce from a supplier. This makes their job more efficient. DI is widely used in frameworks like Spring, Java, and Angular JavaScript to improve applications architecture. Now let's move on to an essential topic in web security, HTTP versus HTTPS. So what is the difference between HTTP and HTTPS? Whenever you browse the internet, you might notice websites using HTTP or HTTPS, but what's the difference? HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is the standard protocol for web communication. However, it is not secure, meaning data can be intercepted. And HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, is HTTP with encryption using SSL/TLS, ensuring secure communication between your browser and the server. That's why banking sites and e-commerce platforms always use HTTPS to protect sensitive user data. Speaking of web communication, let's now discuss REST. REST, Representational State Transfer, is an architectural style for designing web services. REST APIs use HTTP method like GET to retrieve data, POST to send new data, PUT to update data, and DELETE to remove data. REST APIs return data in JSON or XML format, making them easy to use across different platforms. A real world example of REST is when a mobile app fetches weather updates from a server. Now let's talk about how programming handles tasks sequentially or concurrently, synchronous versus asynchronous programming. So what's the difference between synchronous and asynchronous programming? In synchronous programming, tasks are executed one after another, blocking execution until the current task finishes. In asynchronous programming, tasks can run concurrently, allowing other operations to continue while waiting for a task to complete. For example, imagine ordering food at a restaurant. Synchronous, you order food and wait until it's ready before doing anything else. Asynchronous, you order food and while waiting, you check your phone or chat with friends. Now, asynchronous programming is widely used in JavaScript, async await promises, and Node.js to handle tasks like APIs called efficiently. Speaking of JavaScript, let's talk about callbacks. So, what are callbacks in JavaScript? A callback function is a function that is passed as an argument to another function and is executed after a task is completed. Callbacks are commonly used in asynchronous programming, especially in JavaScript, to handle tasks like fetching data from APIs. However, too many callbacks can lead to callback hell, making code hard to read. To solve this, JavaScript introduced promises. So, what are promises in JavaScript? A promise represents a value that will be available in the future. It can be in one of three states: pending, the operation is still in progress; resolved, the operation completed successfully; and rejected, the operation failed. Promises allow for better handling of asynchronous tasks with dot then and dot catch methods, making code cleaner than using callbacks. A good analogy is ordering a package online. You don't wait at the door, instead, you get notified when it arrives. So, what is event driven programming? You get notified when it arrives. So, now let's move to the next question. What is event driven programming? Event driven programming is a paradigm where the flow of a program is determined by events such as user inputs, messages, or sensor outputs rather than executing instructions in a fixed sequence. Think about a graphical user interface application. When you click a button, an event is triggered, executing a function. Similarly, in JavaScript, event listeners handle user interaction like mouse clicks or keyboard inputs. This makes event driven programming highly suitable for real time applications such as web apps, game development, and IoT systems. Now let's shift to a topic in object oriented programming: understanding interfaces and abstract classes. So, what is the difference between an interface and an abstract class? In object oriented programming, both interfaces and abstract class define blueprints for other classes, but they serve different purposes. An interface defines a contract that a class must adhere to. It only contains method signatures, no implementations. A class that implements an interface must provide its own implementations for all defined methods. An abstract class, on the other hand, can contain both method signatures and implemented methods. It allows code reuse while still enforcing a structure. A key distinction is that a class can implement multiple interfaces but can only extend one abstract class. Think of an interface as a contract that a class must follow, while an abstract class is like partially built structure that subclasses can complete. Speaking of structures, let's move on how data is exchanged over the web using HTTP methods. So, what is the difference between HTTP GET and POST methods? When sending requests to a web server, HTTP methods define how data is transmitted. GET is used to retrieve data from the server. The parameters are sent in the URL, making it visible in the address bar. POST is used to send data to the server, such as form submission. The data is included in the body of the request, making it more secure. For example, when you search for something on Google, it uses GET, while logging into a website with a username and password typically uses POST. Now let's move into the realm of multi-threading, an essential concept for improving performance in software applications. So, what is the concept of a thread in programming? A thread is the smallest unit of execution in a process. Multiple threads can run concurrently within a program, allowing tasks to be executed simultaneously rather than sequentially. For instance, when using a web browser, one thread might handle rendering a web page while another handles user interaction. Threads help in achieving multitasking, making applications faster and more efficient. Expanding on this, let's discuss how modern applications are structured using microservice architecture. So, what is a microservice architecture? Microservice architecture is a design approach to where an application is divided into independent, loosely coupled services, each responsible for a specific functionality. For example, an e-commerce applications can have separate microservices for user authentication, product catalog, and payments, all communicating via APIs. This approach improves scalability, fault isolation, and ease of deployment, making it widely used in cloud-based applications. Now let's go back to an important data concept: the difference between shallow and the deep copies. So what is the difference between shallow copy and deep copy? When copying object in programming, A shallow copy creates a new object but only copies references to nested objects. Changes to the original nested will affect the copy. A deep copy creates a completely independent duplicate, including copies of all nested objects. Think of a shallow copy as making a photocopy of a document with sticky notes. If you change the sticky notes on the original, it affects the copy. A deep copy, however, is like retyping the entire document, ensuring no shared dependency. Now let's clarify the difference between abstract and concrete classes. So, what is the difference between an abstract class and a concrete class? An abstract class is a class that cannot be instantiated and may contain abstract methods without implementation. It serves as a base for other classes. A concrete class, on the other hand, is a fully implemented class that can be instantiated. Think of an abstract class as a blueprint with incomplete details, while a concrete class is a fully built structure ready to use. Now let's discuss two essential data structure, stacks and queues. So what is a stack and queue in data structures? Both stacks and queues are data structure used for storing and retrieving data efficiently, but they follow different principles. A stack operates on the last in, first out principle, meaning the last item added is the first one removed. Think of a stack of plates in one cafeteria. A queue follows the first in, first out principle, where the first item added is the first one removed. It is similar to a queue of people at a ticket counter. These structures are widely used in memory management, task scheduling, and algorithm design. Now let's talk about an important tree structure, the binary tree. So what is a binary tree? A binary tree is a hierarchical data structure where each node has at most two children, left and right. Binary trees are used in search algorithms, databases, and artificial intelligence. One popular type is the binary search trees (BST), which allows fast searching, insertion, and deletion. Understanding binary trees is crucial for data organization and retrieval. Speaking of organizing data efficiently, let's move on to hashing algorithms. So, what is the purpose of a hashing algorithm? A hashing algorithm transforms input data into a fixed size string, often a unique hash code. Hashing is used in data retrieval, example, hash tables for quick lookups, encryption, example, password hashing for security, third, data integrity, example, checksums to verify file integrity. A good analogy is a fingerprint scanner. It uniquely identifies a person just as a hash uniquely represents data. So now let's move to the next question. What is a deadlock in multithreading? A deadlock occurs when two or more threads are permanently blocked because each is waiting for a resource locked by another thread. This leads to a situation where none of the threads can proceed, causing a system freeze or slow down. Imagine two people trying to pass through a narrow doorway from opposite sides. Neither wants to step back, so both remain stuck. Similarly, in multi-threading, a deadlock happens when multiple threads hold on to resources that others need, preventing progress. To avoid deadlocks, developers use strategies like lock ordering, timeout mechanism, and deadlock detection algorithms. Now that we understand deadlocks, let's talk about a crucial process that helps manage memory efficiently, garbage collection. So, what is garbage collection in programming? Garbage collection (GC) is the process of automatically identifying and freeing up memory occupied by objects that are no longer needed. In many programming languages, memory is allocated dynamically when creating objects. However, if objects are no longer used but still occupy memory, it can lead to inefficiencies like memory leaks. Garbage collection helps by tracking and removing these unused objects. Think of it like cleaning a room. If you never remove unused items, the room becomes cluttered. Garbage collection ensures memory remains optimized by discarding objects that are no longer referenced. Now let's move to databases and explore primary keys, a fundamental concept in data management. A primary key is a unique identifier for each record in a database table. It ensures that every row remains distinct and prevents duplication. For example, in a student database, a student ID can serve as a primary key because no two students will have the same ID. Even if two students share the same name, their ID differentiates them. Primary key play a crucial role in a database indexing, ensuring fast retrieval and maintaining data integrity. Now that we have covered primary key, let's discuss how tables are connected using foreign keys. So, what is a foreign key in a database? A foreign key is a field in one table that uniquely identifies a row in another table, establishing a relationship between the two tables. For example, in an e-commerce database, there might be two tables, a customer table containing a unique customer ID, an order table containing orders and a customer ID as a foreign key to link each other to the correct customer. Foreign keys help maintain relationship between data, ensuring that an order always belongs to a valid customer. Now let's move to programming and explore the difference between functions and methods. A function is an independent block of reusable code that performs a specific task, while a method is a function that is associated with an object or class. Think of a function as a general recipe that everyone can use, while a method is like a recipe inside a specific cookbook. It belongs to that book or class and is used accordingly. Methods have the advantage of working with the data contained in an object, making them essential for object oriented programming. Now let's shift our focus to text processing and discuss regular expressions. So, what is the purpose of regular expressions? Regular expressions are patterns used for searching, matching, and manipulating text. They are widely used in data validation, pattern recognition, and text extraction. For instance, regular expressions can be used to validate email addresses, find keywords in a document, or format phone numbers correctly. Think of regex as a powerful search tool that allows you to find patterns rather than just exact words, making it incredibly useful for handling textual data. Now let's move on to an efficient searching technique, binary search. So, what is a binary search algorithm? Binary search is a fast and efficient way to find an element in a sorted array by repeatedly dividing the search space in half. Instead of checking every element one by one, binary search starts in the middle of the database. Instead of checking every element one by one, binary search starts in the middle of the dataset and determines whether the target value is higher or lower. It then eliminates It then eliminates half of the remaining elements and repeats the process. Imagine looking for a word in a dictionary instead of flipping through every page. You start in the middle and decide whether to move forward or backward. This approach makes binary search much faster than linear search. Now let's shift gears to object-oriented programming and discuss constructors. So, what is the purpose of a constructor in object-oriented programming? A constructor is a special function used to initialize the object of a class when they are created. Think of a constructor like an automatic setup process. When you buy a new phone, it comes with a default setting and pre-installed apps. Similarly, a constructor sets up an object with default values or initial configuration when it is created. Constructors ensure that objects are properly initialized, making programming more efficient and reducing errors. Now let's differentiate between deep cloning and shallow cloning. A shallow copy creates a new object but only copies references to the original data. This means that if the original data changes, the copy also reflects those changes. A deep copy, on the other hand, creates a completely independent duplicate, ensuring that changes in the original do not affect the copy. Imagine making a photocopy of a document with sticky notes. If you remove the sticky notes from the original, they disappear from the photocopy too. That's a shallow copy. But if you manually rewrite everything, including the sticky notes, you have a deep copy. Deep copies are useful when you need independent duplicates of complex data structures. Finally, let's discuss a core principle of object-oriented programming, polymorphism. So what is the polymorphism in object-oriented programming? Polymorphism allows objects of different classes to be treated as objects of a common superclass, enabling methods to behave differently based on the object type. For example, a draw method in a shape class can be used for circles, squares, and triangles, each implementing the method differently. A circle might draw a curved shape, while a square might draw four straight lines, but they all share the same method name. Polymorphism makes code more flexible and reusable, allowing for dynamic method behavior without modifying existing code structure. So let's move to the next question. What is an interface in programming? An interface is a contract that defines a set of method signatures that a class must implement. Unlike a class, an interface does not provide any implementation for these methods. It only specifies what method a class would have. Think of an interface like a job description. It outlines the tasks that need to be performed but does not specify how to complete them. Different employees classes can implement the job differently while still fulfilling the same responsibilities. For example, in a vehicle rental system, an iVehicle interface might define methods like start engine and stop engine. Different vehicle types, cars, bikes, trucks, will implement these methods in their own way. Interfaces are widely used in software development to achieve abstraction, multiple inheritance, and code consistency. Now let's discuss another core principle of OOP, encapsulation. So, what is encapsulation in object-oriented programming? Encapsulation is the practice of bundling data, attributes, and methods that operate on the data into a single unit, typically a class. It also involves restricting direct access to some parts of the object data to protect it from unintended modification. Imagine a capsule pill. It encloses its content, preventing direct interaction while only exposing necessary access points. Similarly, encapsulation hides an object's internal state and provides control access through methods. For example, in a bank account class, the balance should not be directly modified. Instead, we use methods like deposit amount and withdraw amount to interact with the balance, ensuring proper validation. Encapsulation enhances security, maintainability, and flexibility in software design. Now let's clarify the difference between classes and objects. So, what is the difference between a class and an object? A class is a blueprint for creating objects, while an object is an instance of a class. Think of a class as a template, like a recipe for baking a cake. The object is the actual cake created using that recipe. For example, a car class may define properties like color, model, and speed, along with the methods like start and stop. However, a specific car object, such as my car, might have a color of red and a model of sedan. Classes provide structure while objects bring them to life by holding real world data and behavior. Now let's shift our focus to testing, a crucial phase in software development, and explore unit testing. So, what is unit testing? Unit testing is a software testing technique where individual components or unit of a program are tested separately to ensure they function correctly. Imagine testing each piece of a car engine separately before assembling the full car. Similarly, unit testing verifies that each function or module works as expected before integrating them into a larger system. Unit tests help identify bugs early, improve code quality, and make debugging easier. They are often automated and written alongside the main code base using testing frameworks. Now let's discuss how different software components communicate using APIs. So what is an API? An API, application programming interface, is a set of rules that allows one software application to communicate with another. Think of an API as a restaurant menu. You don't need to know how the kitchen operates, but you can order food using the provided options. Similarly, an API lets developers use predefined methods to interact with a system without needing to understand its internal workings. For example, when you use Google Maps inside a ride sharing app, the app communicates with Google's API to fetch map data. APIs make it possible for different systems, services, and applications to work together seamlessly. Now let's move on to an important design pattern, the observer pattern. So what is the observer design pattern? The observer pattern is a design pattern where an object called the subject maintains a list of dependent objects called observers and notifies them of any state changes. Think of a news subscription service. When new articles are published, all subscribers, observers are notified automatically. This pattern is widely used in event-driven programming and real-time applications like stock market updates, messaging apps, and user interface elements. Next, let's discuss an essential tool in software development, logging frameworks. So, what is the purpose of a logging framework in a software development? A logging framework records event, errors, and system activities, helping developers debug and monitor application. Imagine driving a car without a dashboard. You wouldn't know your speed, fuel level, fuel level, or any potential issues. Similarly, without logging, developer wouldn't have insights into system performance or failures. Logging frameworks capture important runtime information such as error logs for debugging issues, performance logs for analyzing execution time, security logs for tracking unauthorized access attempts. Popular logging frameworks include Log4j Java, Nlog.net, and Winston Node.js. Now let's clarify the difference between a thread and a process. So what is the difference between a thread and a process? A process is an independent program running in the system, while a thread is a smaller unit of the execution within the process. Think of a process as a factory. It runs independently, handling multiple tasks. Threads are the workers inside the factory executing tasks concurrently. So key differences: a process has its own memory space while threads share memory within the same process. Creating a process requires more resources while threads are lightweight. If a process crashes, it does not affect others, but if a thread crashes, it may impact the whole process. Multi-threading improves application performance by allowing parallel executions of tasks. Now, let's explore another design pattern, the factory pattern. So, what is the factory design pattern? The factory pattern is a design pattern used to create objects without specifying their exact class. It delegates object creation to a separate method, promoting flexibility and reusability. Think of a car factory. You can request a car, but you don't need to know the specific manufacturing details. The factory produces different car models based on given parameters. This pattern is widely used when multiple object types need to be created dynamically while keeping the code base maintainable. Finally, let's discuss an essential architectural principle, dependency injection. So, what is dependency injection? Dependency injection (DI) is a design pattern where an object's dependencies are provided externally instead of being created within the object itself. Imagine hiring a driver. You can provide different cars dependencies without modifying the driver's skill. Similarly, DI allows objects to receive their dependencies from an external source, making them more flexible and testable. Benefits of DI: improves modularity by separating object creation from usage. It enhances testability by allowing mock dependencies in unit test. Reduces tight coupling between classes, making the code more maintainable. DI is widely used in frameworks like Spring, Java, and Angular JavaScript. And that brings us to end of this session. We have covered a lot of essential software development concepts from object-oriented programming and APIs to design patterns and system architecture. If you have made it this far, congratulations. You are building a strong foundation that will help you ace interviews and improve your skill as a developer. But remember, learning never stops. The best way to truly understand these concepts is to keep practicing, building projects, and applying them in real world scenarios. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future content. And if you have any question or topics you would like me to cover in the next video, drop a comment below. I would like to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Happy coding.